Alright guys, welcome back. In this video, we'll be talking about referencing continuous and non-continuous range. So guys, I must emphasize that this is a very, very important subtopic that you have to understand in Visual Basic application, because this knowledge is going to be cascaded down the road, and it's something that you're going to use a lot if you intend on becoming a VBA developer and intend on using complex application. You have to understand this. So pay attention to what I'm about to deliver here, and make sure you take note of everything very, very carefully, and make sure that you understand all of it. I don't say it often, but for this episode, you really, really have to pay attention and understand everything that is being told and said. Okay, so let's get on to it. Okay, referencing ranges. Okay, so generally we have continuous and non-continuous range. Okay, so continuous range, or it's, for example, I go back to the editor, I have one single range that I'm highlighting in green here. Okay, this is one range that is continuous. This is another range. Okay, range B. I'm going to highlight this in blue. So these are two continuous range. Okay, a non-continuous range is the example when the range has a separation or a distance between it, and it's not continuous, meaning that it's not contiguous, right? You have range 1 and range 2. And sometimes in VBA, not sometimes, most of the time, you would have to find the last row of the particular range and then reference them together. Okay, so we'll get into that in the future, but for now, you really need to understand how do we reference contiguous and non-contiguous, or and another way to put it, continuous and non-continuous range. Okay, so let's start with the most basic example. How do we reference something like the most basic one? Okay, range A1. Okay, if I'm going to reference range A1, the simplest way is, of course, the first thing you could do is just say range A1, right? That is if you are not that is if assuming that you are not combining it with the last row, whatever it is. So this is one way to put it. Okay, and blah blah blah, it's just 25. Okay, you can do that, but if you have to combine it with the last row and you're not sure that one is the last row, if you get what I mean, then you would actually have to find the last row, and then, I mean, if you don't have a literal representation of the number 1, but rather you like to represent it with L row, right? So what you would do is actually you would say debug.range A, and then you're going to combine it. Okay, you're going to add the AND, right? Concatenate it with the AND, and then you're going to say 1, okay? Or L row, whatever it is, okay? But this is how you generally combine them together. So in this case, I know it's 1, so I'm just going to put 1. And that's about it, okay? We're just going to debug that to check that we were on the right track, okay? So Control C, Control V. See, I have A1. Okay, so no big deal. This is a basic one. Let's move on to something bigger. So we are referencing range, let's say A4 to B8. Now, assuming that this is absolutely static, right? And you have the perfect value for the numeric for the 4 and 8, right? You're not combining it with any last row, and nothing overly complicated. Then you could just say something like range A4 to B8 is the equivalent of 50, right? So, but if you have to combine that with the last row, this is one way you can do it. Range A4 to B, and you can just add the 8 or the L row, whatever you want to add, right? So I'm just gonna debug dot print dot address. Okay, and if I just copy it and paste it into the immediate window, what do you think we're gonna see? A4 to B8, right? As expected. Okay, So this is one way to do it. And another more complicated way, but more dynamic in the sense that the for, let's say you are trying to run through a code, and the first row and the last row is something that you're not sure, meaning that it's not a literal number, right? It's something that is defined by a variable L row or F first row, whatever it is. Okay, so then you might want to do something like this, right? So all right, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a while, right? Okay, we'll talk about that in a while. So another way to represent range A4 and B8, right? Another way to write that is you can actually write it this way, right? We'll get to that in a while. We'll get to that in a while, but I just decided I want to touch this before, okay? So range A4 to B8, okay? This is a continuous range, so meaning that if it is a continuous range, what you would have to do, right, is you would actually have to write it this way. Okay, A4. So this is what a lot of people, if you go down to Excel help forum, you see a lot of people being confused about the notation, right? This is the simplest type of, the fundamental building blocks of VBA that a lot of people that I've helped resolve issues in the past do not understand, right? That this comma, right? This comma separation is so important. You have to understand that if you're representing range A4 to B8, meaning that it's a continuous range, this is how you write it, right? So range A4, you have to use the comma, right? The comma is not part of the expression. Okay, the comma is not part of the expression in a continuous range. Okay, so I'm just going to say dot value equals to 30. Okay, and then I'm just going to debug that as well, right? I'm just going to debug the range that I have written here. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it, and I'm just going to add the letter address next to it. And what do you think we're going to see? We're going to see something like this. See, A4 to B8. This is a continuous range, so I'm just going to add it right here. Continuous range. Okay, so make sure you were clear about that. Now there's no confusion whatsoever. Now, a non-continuous range, you write it something like that, but it's written in a bit more creative way, meaning that we're going to have range A4 to B8, but this time A4 and B8 are non-continuous, meaning that you only want to take these two address, A4 and B8, not A4 all the way to B8. Okay, so we're going to go range A4 and look at that, B8. As you can see, the comma is now part of the expression. The comma is part of the expression. So equals to 25. Okay, the comma is part of the expression. Remember that. This is very important for you. Okay, so if I just debug.print that, okay, I just debug.print that address, what do you think we're going to get? We're going to check that in a second. Okay. Man, I don't know what. So let me just type in range dot address. Okay, we're gonna copy that and paste it into the immediate window. Right, you see what results is it giving us? A4 and B8, meaning that VBA is recognizing that this is non-continuous. Okay, so you have to understand this. Make sure you are crystal clear about this. Okay, you have to be crystal clear about this. So now, if you're going to combine this with the last row or the first row, whatever it is, right? A more complex way of writing, or more dynamic way of writing this is you could actually say something like this: range A, gonna write 4, right? This is a continuous range. This is a continuous range. Okay, so what do you think we're gonna have? Okay, a continuous range, meaning the comma is not part of the expression. So just gonna put B and 8 dot address. Okay, so if I copy this paste it into the immediate window, you would see you're getting the range A4 to B8. Similarly, if I like to combine it, write it in a more dynamic way, range for a non-continuous range, A, right? And for, what do you think is what we're going to do next, right? We're going to add another N, because now the comma is part of the expression. The comma is part of the expression, right? So we're going to put a comma and B, right? And 8 dot address. Okay, so the comma right here is part of the expression. Now if I debug dot print that, what do you think we're going to get? A4 and B8. You see, it's not going all the way from A4 to B8. It's taking the range of A4 and just B8. So I hope you guys are getting a hang of it. Okay, hope you guys are getting a hang of it. So let's do something a little bit more complicated, right? Let's talk about a range A4. So we're going to have something a little bit more difficult, but it's exactly the same if you know what you're doing, right? I mean, the foundation block is what we've touched just a while ago, right? So C9 to D16. Let's just have something like this, okay? So this one is a continuous range, right? Is it a continuous range? Yes. So the comma is not part of the expression, right? Continuous range. How do we write this? How do we write this? So there are two ways to write this, right? There are two ways to write this. The first way to write this is we can just say, we can just say range debug. You know what? Let's just break it down. Let's just break it down into two sets so that we understand that. Let's talk about range. The first one is the A4 to B8 range. A4 and B8, right? So this one has to be continuous, right? Because we're taking the range of A4 to B8 all the way to D16, right? So, and the second case is a non-continuous, meaning you're taking A4 and B8 and C9 and D16. Okay, so this is a continuous range case, right? So how do we express that? We're gonna do the, just gonna say range, okay, range, sorry, debug, bear with me guys, okay, range A and 4, right, B and 8 dot address. Okay, likewise we're going to do the same with range. So this is a continuous case, right? Range C9 and D16. Okay, debug dot print range C and 9 D and 16 dot address. Okay, so we just paste into the VBA editor. Okay, but we're going to understand what we're doing in a while. Okay, just we're talking about a continuous range. You can see that A4 to B8 is being referenced, and the next part, if we copy this, C9 and D16 is being referenced. So now the question is, how do we combine them together, right? How do we combine them together, right? So the way we want to combine them, right, is we could actually do something very interesting, okay, whereby we can just define this as a variable, right? We can just say dim rng1 as string, dim rng2 as string, right? So what am I going to say? What I'm going to do is something very simple. rng1 is just this one, right? Okay. And I'm just going to add 0, 0 because I want to remove the absolute sign in front of it, right? The absolute sign, before the address, you wanted to express it in a relative form. You don't have to do it, but I prefer just to do it that way. Range 2 is just going to be something that we've touched earlier. Right? We're going to copy it and just paste it. And now, for the case of a continuous range, what I could do is I could just do something like this: debug.print range 1. And we know that, well, there is no comma, right? The comma is not part of the expression. So we just do this. So this is my range, a combined continuous range, right? So if I copy this and paste it into the immediate window, right? I'm trying to understand what am I missing here. Range, I'll get to you in a second. Right, I just discovered what it is. We have to run the code because we have to define the expression, right? The expression, the code has to run through the expression. So once it has run through the expression, then we will be able to get the results of this debug.print. So I'm just going to set a breakpoint. I'm going to set a breakpoint, then I'm going to run it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear everything that has been run previously. And then I'm just going to hit F8. As you could see, continuous range A4 to D16 has been declared, right? So what about the case of a non-continuous range? Right, I'd like to introduce you to something more interesting. This is when we use the application.union, right? The application.union is a very powerful expression to indicate that you're expressing two ranges that are not continuous, right? Because in the case of a continuous range, you just have to put a comma and then range 2. But in the case of a non-continuous range, it gets a little bit, I'm not sure what exactly this is headed to, right? Because, this is a rather complicated expression, right? Of A4 to B8, C9 to D16, right? Non-continuous range case of range A4. So as you can see, the comma is now not part of this. So I'm just going to remove that. Okay. Right. The comma is part of the expression now for a non-continuous range. Okay. So if you debug.print this, address, what do you think we're going to get? This is a non-continuous range. Okay. If I paste it into the VBA editor, you can see that A4, B8, C9 to D16. Okay. But if we want to combine it with the first row, last row, whatever, right? Make it absolutely dynamic. What we would do is we can do something like this: debug.print application.union, right? Application.union range. So what are the two ranges that we're talking about? Range 1, okay, 1, and range 2. Remember, this was just the range 1 is just in a string form, right? So range, for instance, range A4 to B8, then you would just union, right? Union meaning that it's gonna take two range and consider it not to be continuous or non-continuous. That's what it means, right? The expression union, right? So if I get this, right? Okay, once again, I have to run the code. So I'm just gonna set a breakpoint right here. Okay, I'm going to set a breakpoint F9, and then we're going to run the code. And once we've reached the breakpoint, we're just going to delete all the code that is run, and then we're going to hit F8. And you can see that, voila, A4 to B8, C9 to D16, right? So meaning that VBA is recognizing this is not part of the continuous range. Okay, this was part of a non-continuous range. So that's about it for this video. Please go through this video if you have any doubts, and make sure that you come to a crystal clear clarity, because this is one of the fundamental building blocks of Visual Basic application. Okay, right. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you. Take care.